everyone gets to hear this, and you can share it with your board members and other staff. And this is, I'm Jacqueline Hanna from Food Co-op Initiative. This is our COVIDeo series. I think this is video number 13 in the series so far. This was developed in response to the sense that you all were asking a lot of questions, and often the same questions, and we were getting lots of calls, and we thought, why don't we get us all in the room to share information together? And a ton of people, experts, leaders in the field have offered to come forward and be part of this, for which we're very grateful. And today, hey, Sola's in the house. I love all the details you guys are sharing. Upper Valley Food Co-op, wow, hi. We are going to get started on our topic today. So I'm going to start sharing some slides with you all. All right, here we go, share. And of course, I'm on the last slide. Got to move us back to the first slide. All right, so our topic today is pivoting your organizing. So like I said, this is aimed at startup food co-ops. We're going to be talking to a leader of a startup food co-op today. But I would say that actually in a lot of ways, actually when I labeled the folder, we're going to put all the stuff in for you later, I just called it Assabet on Leadership. And the reason I point that out is because I think a lot of what we're talking about today is how leaders, if you were on our first call, we talked about the tool of pausing and assessing and then taking action, right? And actually today's call is about how a leadership team, how a board paused and assessed and made decisions to move forward and how they've served them. So this is really going to be applicable to anyone who's making leadership decisions at a top level at a co-op. So, so glad to see so many folks, and I usually write down in notes so I can see it all at once, but I see we have in the room today, Westchester is with us, Free Range, Purple Carrot, Sola, it's out of LA, Upper Valley Food Co-op from Vermont. I see we got Paso Food Co-op, California, Market 166, hey, East Point, Georgia. Nice to see you guys. White River Grocery Co-op, Grand Rapids Food Co-op out in Michigan. We have Monadnock Food Co-op out of Keene, New Hampshire. Now, I have to take a moment, guys. Monadnock Food Co-op was a startup food co-op too, and I believe they just celebrated their 5th anniversary, and they're celebrating it by planning an expansion. So, hey, Monadnock, thank you for being an inspiration to all of us.
Update.
Uh-oh, update, okay.
Update, it's 8 years. 7 years. 7. It's 7. And there is steel above the ground.
Woo! Oh, I thought the update was going to be that you're pausing. That's even better. Thank you.
We are not pausing. We are full steam ahead, as long as they let us still have construction workers there.
Right, as long as that's safe. Understandable.
Yep.
Thanks so much for the update. That's awesome. Mad River Market's here from Winstead, Connecticut. Pullman Good Food out of Pullman, Washington. Startup. Village Co-op Market of Williamsville. Who did I miss? Everyone getting it in there? Oh, Charleston, South Carolina. Early initial planning. They don't even have a name yet. Many of you have been there. Welcome, guys. And another Whitewater Grocery Co. Bethlehem. Yay! Bethlehem Food Co-op. 700 members strong out of Bethlehem, PA. And Common Share Food Co-op, Amherst, Massachusetts. And I'm sure more will be joining us as you're joining. Go ahead and throw that in the chat. Everyone else here would love to see who's here with them. We are doing video. We are recording. If you can share video, if you're willing to be on video, it just really helps us. It makes the conversation more robust. We can see who we're talking to. We appreciate it. You don't have to, but we love it if you do it. Do mute. If you aren't currently actively speaking, please use that mute button so we have good sound for everybody. This call is being recorded, so keep that in mind when you decide what to share, as this video will be shared publicly. And for our check-ins, we just list off food co-ops because there's so many people in the room, we don't get a chance to individually check in. Although there will be an opportunity at 4:30 p.m. Central Time today to talk to one another and actually fully check in on how you're doing and how your organizing is going. We'll talk about the details of how to join that at the end of this session. I see Cedar Falls just joined us as well. All right, it's off the video. There you go. So we're gonna really try and stay on topic today and keep these focused. We continue to find we could all talk for hours, and there's so much that's going on, so much on our minds, so much we'd like to share. So please do respect if I try and reshape the conversation or get us on topic, or if I say a question you threw in the chat, that we're going to handle that outside the call so we can just get through everything we're hoping to cover in 1 hour. If you need more support, we are always here. Food Co-op Initiative is free to any startup food co-op. Just email us at info.fci.coop, and we will happily answer your question by email if you'd like, or set up a time for a call. Okay, today's speaker is Siobian Mitchell, board chair at Assabet Village Co-op Market. And I specifically asked her to join us because I've been talking to lots of you, phone calls and emails, about how you're pivoting at this time, what you're doing about making decisions, messaging, all those things. And as I talked about in our first video, I'm very fond of the board being self-aware that they're making leadership decisions and pausing and assessing and making those clearly and specifically. And in talking to Siobian, it really felt like her and her team were doing that. Now, she's going to be the first to tell you imperfectly. She's going to tell you, I'm making it sound a lot more focused than it was. But what I heard in talking to them, whether it was really consciously focused or not, is that they really thought through their 3 areas of work, which we're going to touch on today, and just made conscious decisions of how to assess what needs to happen now, what needs to pause. So let's welcome Siobian from Assabet Village Co-op Market. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Hi everyone.
And Siobian, you've been, I know you just became board chair again, but you've been on the board with Assabet Village Co-op Market for how long now?
Well, I've been with this project since before there was the board, since before we incorporated. And we had our very first meetings at a pizza place here in town in March of 2012. So I just hit 8 years.
Wow. So I want to point out to a lot of you who are like, we have been organizing 6 years and we don't have a site yet. I would say Assabet Village Co-op Market is doing a terrific job, has a very high likelihood of getting open, but they're 8 years in, and it does happen like that. And actually, the most successful startups out there, River Valley Co-op is one of the ones that comes to mind, took 10 years. So some of you get open in 4, some get open in 5, 7, 6, 7, whatever, but don't be discouraged if you're at year 8. And Siobian, could you share with us, just tell us a little kind of like what your co-op's organized around, where you're located, what size you're hoping to be?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are Maynard, we're in Maynard, Massachusetts. We are Metro west of Boston, so we're in the suburbs. Maynard is geographically pretty small. The whole town is like 5.5 square miles. It's pretty densely built up though, because it's a mill town. And so right in the middle of our downtown is this giant mill complex. And Maynard is more socioeconomically diverse than some of those suburbs that surround us. The suburbs that surround us are pretty affluent. So, you know, part of why it's been such a challenge to find a site is that our town is only 5.5 square miles. So, you know, a lot of our organizing, a lot of our messaging has been around local food and strengthening the regional food system. In Maynard, though, there's kind of this additional economic message that is also resonating with our community. Does that answer the question?
It does. And I'm going to let you talk more about your project and some of the future slides too, but I wanted to just give everyone kind of a flavor of where you guys are at. And there's a graphic on the screen, Grow, Fund, Build. This is messaging and wording that was actually created by the outreach manager, I believe, at Assabet Village Co-op Market. And it's excellent. Like, we have stolen it, P6'd it, Principle 6, sharing amongst co-ops. That's our nice word for, hey, we're gonna take that. And it's terrific messaging, and you're gonna see more of that. They're very strong in messaging. But what we're gonna get into, I want Siobian to walk us through what their thought processes have been in each area. There's 3 areas of startup food co-op organizing: governance, ownership and outreach, and business development. Now, if you're an established co-op and on the line, this isn't really different except for draw a line down the middle of this image. Governance is the board's responsibility. Ownership and outreach and business development is under the GM and the operational staff. And then there's a point where you guys come in together, of course, and do strategic planning. In a startup food co-op, all of this responsibility is on the back of the board, which is a working board. So we're going to come from that perspective today. But on all three of these areas, you need to pause, assess, and make decisions on what to prioritize, what has to be deprioritized now, where you're going to put your focus. And we're going to go really in depth on Assabet's story of how they did that. Keep in mind, Assabet is in stage 2B organizing, and if they could get a darn site, they would easily be in stage 3 right now. So they're far along in their process, and your process may look different. You are serving a different community, you're at a different point in your development, but this is just one co-op story that I think you can learn a lot from no matter what stage you're in. So we're going to jump in with governance first, and I'm always going to put governance first, and we're going to talk about that. So Siobhan, can you talk to us and be honest about what shape was your governance, your board, your governance work in when all of this COVID-19 started?
And I will give you an honest answer. It was not great. So we had a director leave the board at the end of 2019, like November 2019. And so we went down from 7 to 6. And at the time, we decided not to start right then to look for a replacement. We figured that we would get through the holidays, kind of come back, start talking about it again in January, February, maybe try to bring somebody in the spring, end of February, March. And then I lost 2 more board members right before the pandemic hit. So, and one of them I found out that I was losing it was like the week before Up and Coming. So Jacqueline got to watch me cry a little bit at Up and Coming. And actually one of those directors had taken the chairmanship. So she was somebody that I had worked with for about a year. And I had trained her up and I had worked with her, and we had she had just taken over after the last owners meeting in October. So I'm back because I know how to do it and I could step into that role. So when the pandemic hit, we were down to 4
board members.
4 board members. And now we have a national crisis. So that's the answer to the question of what shape was your governance in when COVID-19 hit.
But on other levels, and I do want to point this out, because definitely, it already was in a little bit of crisis, down to 4 board members, having to switch chairs again. But in another way, your governance was, so your meeting processes, your policies, your use of policy, how was that at Assabet?
That is very strong. That is very, very strong. And that's part of why I spent so much time working with Nancy, was really getting her up to speed on a lot of this stuff, because we have a very strong, healthy board culture. All the directors, at least those of us that are left, take the job very seriously. We do all our prep work. We come into that meeting room, educated and ready to go. We have a really solid process for running meetings. We do run on consensus. We're a consensus board. And we have guidelines and policies and all of that. And I can't singly take credit for that. That was work that our board had done while I was chairing, but it was really a collective effort over the course of several years to really get that framework up and running. And that framework still exists, and it has served us very well during this crisis. So yeah, so that we do have going for us.
So I just signed you up, sorry, but you were talking about these fabulous policies, which you do have. And so I volunteered you up. I asked folks if they'd like copies of your policies to go out with the call.
Yep, I can share our board of directors guidelines, our board application packet. I can share our full policy register that's also on our website, along with our bylaws, so you can go scoop it there. But yeah,
I'm taking notes.
Yeah, all of that stuff. I'll make sure you have it to put it in the folder.
Awesome. I will make sure that goes in the folder with everything else today, guys. So let's take it from there. So down to 4 board members, a little bit of a governance crisis, but you've got good systems in place, and maybe begrudgingly, but a very experienced board chair back in the saddle. So what did your board just, I mean, so COVID-19 hits, and a lot of people, you know, oh my God, what are we gonna do about business development? Oh my God, how do we communicate? What did you guys actually pull back right away and immediately observed your governance and decided what to do about that? Can you talk me through that?
Yeah. So really, the decision that we made, and we made it pretty fast, was that we were gonna governance our way out of this mess. So I am still doing the work of trying to recruit people to join the board. That hasn't changed. The way that I'm doing it now is a little bit different. Obviously, I'm not meeting people for a coffee or for a beer. We can't do that. So I am doing phone calls with people. I'm doing Zooms with people. I'm also going a little bit faster than I would have normally. So normally what we would have done is we would have spent, you know, a fair amount of time with somebody. We do like an intro to board service. We have them come to that, and then we have them come to a few meetings, and so it is kind of a long process. So I'm trying to speed that process up a little bit, but I'm also trying not to skip any of the pieces, because all of the pieces in that process are really important, right?
Yeah.
I don't want anybody coming to meetings who doesn't know what to expect, who doesn't know what they're getting into. So I'm just kind of doing that now. So I have one person who's joining the board this coming Monday, so we're going to be up to 5. And I have another person who really wanted to join the board, but after several conversations that we had a really hard time scheduling, she kept canceling and rescheduling because of her work and her husband's work, and you know, her kids are home. That was a sign that she does not really have the capacity. Now, she did have the capacity before the pandemic, but because of the pandemic, she does not have the capacity to join the board. So I'm still out there. I'm still looking for board members. And so, like I said, we're going to be up to 5 on Monday, and I do intend to get us back up to 7. Obviously, the pandemic didn't magically make the board recruitment process easier.
That was going to be my next question for you. Actually, I'm going to pause for a second and say, real quick, Mad River did ask, what's your minimum number of board directors? Does your bylaws even mandate that?
Yeah, so we're supposed to be at 7, according to our board. Yeah, according to our bylaws.
And I love the comments, you guys. Yes, Lydia from Paso, better to have a committed person on the board than space filled with no commitment. That is a lesson that all startups have learned the hard way.
Yeah.
And someday we're going to do a whole session with Siobain just on board recruitment, because she's really good at it. But we're going to take just a couple more minutes here before we jump, because I want to make sure we get everything. So you're going to be up to 5. Can you tell everyone a little bit about, because what I've heard a lot from startup boards is we couldn't possibly recruit right now, or we don't even know how we would approach that. And that's an understandable feeling for a lot of people. You're doing it anyway. Tell us how.
You know, I'm doing it kind of the same way that I did it before, except instead of in-person meetings, now I'm using Zoom or the telephone. So, it took me and it took us a little while to get used to being on Zoom, right? I really like in-person meetings. I really like being able to see the room, being able to see people's expressions, you know, and maybe some of those nonverbal cues. But I'm getting used to scanning the boxes, you know, because if you set them up like Brady Bunch style, you know, on your computer, I am adjusting to that, and it is possible. So, so let me just, if I may, let me just tell you the other piece. There's like a whole second part to the answer to that question.
All right.
So the second part, the second piece of what we realized was that we were going to need to delegate way more than we were used to doing. You know, we've been, like I said, we've had a very strong board, and we've worked really hard to make it that way and to keep it that way. We have not, at Assabet, we have not been as good at recruiting and retaining volunteers and delegating effectively. So we might, you know, spin up a committee and you get them to do some work, and it goes well, and then they kind of go away again. And, you know, 9 or 12 months later, you think, oh, gee, it'd be really great if that committee were back. And then you got to go back and see if you can find them. Some people are gone. Now you need to find other people for the committee. We also did a fair amount of work ourselves, more so, I think, than maybe even was appropriate, and was, oh, I'm sorry, my video is a little, let me see if I can fix it. Let's try that. We were doing too much work ourselves, more so than was appropriate, and more than what would ultimately be sustainable for us as we got through the rest of 2B and into stage 3.
Okay.
So we made an internal decision to governance our way out of this and really commit ourselves to doing a better job, ramping up committees, getting people in, getting them empowered, and getting people working for us. And that's going really well. It's easier to get people on committees than it is to convince somebody to join the board. Obviously, it doesn't feel like as big of a commitment. It doesn't feel like as big of a responsibility. And again, these committees are now places where I'm looking for prospective board members, right? So anybody that I can bring in the door into a committee, I have an opportunity there, if they're good and if they're doing good work, to try to move them up the ladder. I'm sorry, my video, I think my computer, I was telling Jacqueline before we started, my computer is dying. And now that I have a stimulus check, I'm finally getting a new one. But I was, fingers crossed, I can make it through the rest of this webinar. So I apologize for all of the,
You're
the
fine.
lines on the screen.
We can still hear you and all your wisdom. We're good. I want to move us off governance, but I do want to ask real quick. Grant from Chicago Market said, what does the role of the rest of your board in recruiting? Because it sounds like you're doing all of it.
For the most part, I am. There's, there are 2 of us that have the internal capacity to work on that. And that other board member and I are both working on recruiting. And then the other 2 don't have the capacity because they work full time. And again, they're home and their kids are home, and it's challenging. So, so those of us that have the capacity to do that work are doing it.
Okay, excellent. So I'm going to move us. We'll take it to taking it to business development. So we have our 3 areas of work: governance. I usually go to ownership and outreach next, but we're going to save the fun for the last because Assabet has some really fun stuff to share with you when we get to outreach. So let's talk about business development. This is where those of you watching may find the most variance in what the right outcome was because of where you're in your development. It's going to be very different about, like, what should we do about our business development work when we're in early stage 2A versus very late 2B and should have been in 3 already. So we're, again, dealing with a co-op that is in late stage 2B, is perfectly ready to be in 3 if that site would just come along. And we never said this. How many owners do you have, Siobhan?
1,210.
Yeah, so they're ready. So let's talk business development a little bit. Give us some context. You did say what size store you're looking at, but where were you at in your business development process when this all hit?
Well, we had just identified and started negotiating on a site. So, you know, this is such a Maynard story. Like, I can't even, like, we've been in site selection for, I think, almost 4 years now. And we finally identified a site and the seller was willing to talk to us. And then a pandemic hits. So that's just our luck. So our site selection committee was already up and was already very strong. And since they still have capacity, we made a decision to keep doing that work, to not pause it. So I actually have signed a purchase and sales agreement for that property. I did that yesterday.
Wow.
And we just wired them $10,000. But there are a lot of unanswered questions about this property. We haven't gotten a building inspector in. We have to do a 21E and environmental assessments. And we haven't gotten Nicole Klimek, Seven Roots, she's our store designer. We haven't gotten her in yet. So what our attorney was able to negotiate with the seller's attorney, the way that the P&S was drawn up, is that once Governor Baker lifts the declared state of emergency in Massachusetts, that's when our 45-day due diligence period starts. So like I said, it's not going to be sold to anybody else. We have an agreed upon price. We have a purchase agreement in place. And there's not a lot that we can do right now, but I'm really grateful for the way that the attorneys negotiated that, because rather than saying this due diligence period, which is going to be 45 days, rather than having it start now or start May 4th, which is the current date that Massachusetts is scheduled to start reopening businesses, but of course that could change, right? So by tying it to the, whatever you call it, the removal or release of that declaration, the emergency declaration, that does give us, that will give us the full 45 days to do what we need to do to make sure that we really can turn that property into a store at a price that we can afford. So, you know, Rob's going to go in, I think, with a GoPro and send the video to Nicole out in California, because she's not going to fly out. I mean, no. So it might save us a little bit of money, actually, to do it that way. But we were able, I also want to add, we were able to get a site-specific sales forecast from Debbie. We're working with Debbie from Columinate. She's our market study analyst. And she was able to do a forecast from her office in Nevada.
Because she has actually been out to your site before, though.
She's been to Maynard. Yep, she came out about 5 years ago in 2015 when we did our first ever market study. And we've done several updates over the years. And we actually, this time around, we did have her re-poll demographic data again. Because the last time she did that was in early 2018, and so those numbers were already getting stale.
Makes sense. So I'm going to mention here, when it comes to feasibility and how all this COVID-19 stuff is going to affect your market study, pro forma, that sort of thing, we're going to be talking a lot about that in May. It's really too early to even start talking about that. So we're working to get Debbie Swaston actually on a call in later May to talk about how this may or may not affect market studies. Right now, she's not predicting major changes in market studies. So getting back to your story, okay, so you've got a plan to basically governance your way out of this. Business development's continuing because you've got a selection committee that has capacity, and you finally have a potentially viable site after 4 or 5 years. Yes. And one thing I noticed you keep talking about is, well, we had capacity here, so we're doing here, or we have to have capacity here, so we're just going forward with this. It's something you identified first for me as I'm talking to all these co-ops about whether to go forward, where to pause, where to move. It's not just a matter of what's the right strategic move, it's a matter of capacity. Could you talk about that for a minute? Identifying where you have it.
Sure. I think you just said everything I'm about to say, though. So yes, so where we do have capacity, actually, where we have the highest level of capacity is in fact in business development. Because we have such a strong site selection team lead who's also a board member, he's doing both, and because he has volunteers, we just spun up on Tuesday. We had our first virtual meeting with our grant writing committee, and that went really well. We got 7 people coming to that, and they all have experience writing grants. Some of them have government experience, some of them have foundation experience. And so the next committee that we're going to be spinning up on this coming Tuesday is going to be our capital campaign committee.
I was just about to ask you about how it's going to affect that. Okay, awesome.
Yeah. So I had a conversation. Ben Sandell is our capital campaign consultant. I had a long conversation, well, long-ish conversation on the phone with him. And we are not going to be able to do like a real phase 1 public campaign until the fall. We're just not going to be able to do it until we're on the other side of this. But what we can do is start making calls to members. We can start that silent phase. And so we're very mindful here at Assabet that we need to have a very specific tone when we approach people, because as we all know, there's a lot of economic carnage out there right now, and some people are out of work, and some, right? So we're going to be very intentional and very mindful in the language that we use. And Ben has been wonderfully helpful. He had a lot of really great ideas for how to approach people in this time. So he's actually coming to that Zoom meeting on Tuesday. Awesome. We're going to start the meeting at 7, and then he's going to come in at 7:30, and he's going to talk to the group of people. So that and we have like 19 people signed up for that Zoom already. So that piece of it for us is probably the strongest piece right now in terms of capacity, which maybe I should think of myself as lucky. That's really the one piece that it would just be tragic. It would be like a Greek tragedy if we finally got a site after 4.5 years and then had to give it up because of a pandemic, right? Like it'd be like that
would be pretty heartbreaking.
So in terms of our governance, our organizational capacity, as I said, I'm still working on board recruitment. We have one person joining Monday. We have a very solid board, and I'm just gonna keep reaching out to people. I'm gonna keep Zooming with people. I'm gonna try to grab people off committees that I think are good. And I do intend to get our board back up to 7. I just don't know exactly how long it's gonna take.
Right.
So the way that I'm kind of running the board right this second is not so much on consensus, but on actual unanimity, right? And the way I kind of think of it is we're supposed to have 7 per our bylaws, and we have 4, and so technically 2 of us is a quorum, and 2 of us could make a decision, and that's like, that's so horrible to me. The idea of 2 of us making a decision for this 1,200 owner cooperative is just horrifying. So basically, I'm approaching it like if we had 7 people, and again, we typically are a consensus board, so we don't do a lot of like just voting and having a simple majority take it. Mm-hmm. That's not how I like to operate. But if we had a 7-person board, 4 of us would be a majority,
right,
of 7. And so I feel like if all 4 of us are in agreement, I have a pretty solid, footing to proceed.
So I'm going to point out real quick here so you were talking about your capacity. What I want to mention is that when we talked about pause and assess, we said, assessing like strategically what needs to be paused, where you need to put your focus. What I want to really point out about what Siobhan's identified is that you also almost need to do a separate assessment. Okay, strategically, what do we need to do right now? And the other one is, where do we actually have capacity and how can we leverage it? So luckily she had business development capacity on her board because that's what they need right now. But if they didn't, I think they would have made a different decision. And so, recruiting, because they had capacity there. So I just want to point out, that's one thing that I thought we missed at FCI when we first said, hey, here's how to pause and assess. Very focused on strategically, which is important. Which things need to get done now, which things don't need to get done right now. But there's almost a second assessment of, and then where do we have capacity, which I think Assabet has really brought to the conversation. So I wanted to point that out. I'm going to give you 1 more minute on business development and governance, and then I'm going to move everybody into the sugar, which is talking about outreach, because they love hearing about it. But do you have anything else you really wanted to share with us about governance and business development?
No, just that I'm really grateful for the 4 people, and then this 5th person coming in who I think is also going to be really great. He has experience working on boards before. And so because of the culture that we have and because of the way that we're already working together, I think it's going to be really, hopefully, pretty easy for us to start managing these committees and task teams and individual volunteers that we're bringing in, because we've already kind of created the structure for doing that, mm-hmm. even though we haven't really taken advantage of that before. And then just for me personally, I'm actually trying to offload as much work as I possibly can to other people, even if it's one person doing 1 hour a week of something for me. I'm trying to actively get off as much off my plate as I possibly can so that I can just focus on keeping the wheels turning. And keeping those agendas going and keeping those reports going, and being in communication with those committee chairs, mm-hmm. And making sure that we're not behind or missing something that we need to be talking about at a meeting.
And that's a really important note to committee chair or to board chairs. I do want to point out is that board chairs have a tendency to be the ones who do the most work sometimes, and they'll take on all the tasks because it just needs to get done. And then they really underestimate that how much capacity it takes to oversee and make sure and connect and to make sure everything's happening. And not only do they tend to underestimate how much capacity it takes, but that piece can even fall by the wayside as you start doing all the tasks. And the board chair's job is really to delegate all the tasks and focus on making sure that the overall organization is healthy and well connected and organized. So cool. I wanted to point that out. We're going to move on to the fun stuff. Our 3 areas of work: governance, business development. We're going to go to ownership and outreach. And in our previous calls, this is what everyone wants to talk about. Let's talk about it as a board thing first, and then we'll get into some really fun examples. So, real quick question here before we move on. Cultivate says they're having a really difficult time with delegating. They're not sure it's a skill they even really have. Is there any advice or tools out there that you might suggest as they're trying to figure out how to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I would suggest creating a committee charter or a task team charter, or even just a list of 3 things that you want somebody to do for you on a regular basis. Put it in writing, discuss it as a board, and then make an arrangement with that person to do the work, get them trained up to do the work, tell them how you want it done, tell them what parameters they can operate in, if they can spend money, if they can't spend money, all that, and then get them reporting to you. Establish a reporting schedule. So if that's every week, if that's every 3 weeks, whatever that looks like. So the more you do this, the more you practice it, the easier it becomes. And I also think it's easier to start with smaller buckets of work, right? So, and even if you have a board member, who's doing something that's not strictly a board task, pretend that they're a task team or a volunteer, and go through that process with them. Even though they're a board member, pretend that they're not, and go through that process, bring it into a meeting, say, this is the list that volunteer X or volunteer Y is going to do for us. Is that what we want them doing? And that way too, if the board member, so part of what we're trying to figure out too is we're trying to make it possible for people to kind of come in and out of jobs and tasks. That's not easy, and it's not quick, but if you have something in writing, and you've already agreed on this is the job, let's say the board member doesn't want to do it anymore, or God forbid the board member gets sick or has a family member that gets sick, you now have a piece of paper and you can reach out to a new volunteer and you can say, all right, we think it's going to take an hour a week or whatever the answer is, and here's the job, and we're going to train you, we're going to show you where to do it in the drive, and this is how you're going to report to me. So start small and practice, and even if it's just amongst your board members, because as you build this muscle, it will get easier and easier. That's my answer. How's that, Jacqueline? What do you think?
That was a fabulous answer. And actually, there's more questions on committees, and I'd love to let's go there, but we need you outreach. So if we have time, we'll circle back. And I think Siobain should also come back and talk about building committees as a whole video. But anyway, we're going to talk about outreach and ownership. So what I want to take this from a board perspective, what I love is that you did. We have a tendency to start food co-ops to say, well, ownership and outreach will figure out what you're doing and kind of notify the board. And actually remember, as a working board, you are delegating work in ownership and outreach, in business development, but you're still actually calling the major shots and have to be on the same page with everybody. And that is how Assabet actually approached it, which is rare in startups. So I'm excited to ever talk about this a little before we show you examples. So the board actually sat down and thought about how we should pivot on ownership and outreach and our messaging. Tell me about it.
Yeah. So the first thing I want to say actually too, before I get into what we decided that we wanted to message was, in terms of our outreach, our capacity has been reduced by this pandemic. Our outreach coordinator is not working as many hours as he used to. He lost his childcare as a result of this, and he has young children. So he's only working about 10 or 12 hours a week right now, whereas he used to work 20. The lucky part of that is that there's no events. There are no in-person events anymore. So there are no events to schedule. There's no events to coordinate volunteers for. And then he would do some of the events he would do himself, depending. He really likes tabling. He has a group of volunteers that table for him. He really enjoys tabling. So depending on the event, if it's an event where it looks like there could be an opportunity to get a lot of members or a lot of people signed up or really spread the word, he's likely to go to that too, and work that event too. So, so we lost almost half of his hours. That happened. But we also stopped doing in-person events. So we thought, well, okay, well, what are we doing right now anyway? We're talking to people, right? So let's talk to people. So then the question is, how do we want to talk to them? What kinds of messages do we want to be putting out there? And is it the same kind of messages that we were doing before the pandemic? And the answer is both yes and no. So, one of the first things we did after everybody really went on lockdown, we posted links to all of the area grocery stores for delivery. Although we linked to Whole Foods on our Facebook page. Like when would you ever do that as a food co-op? But we did it. We're like, okay, Roach Brothers has delivery, Whole Foods has delivery, Peapod, here's how you find all the delivery services. We also started signal boosting for the local food pantry. And we signal boosted it took our public schools a week or so, but they ramped up a program to actually produce lunches for all the families where those kids were getting free and reduced lunch. And now it's like curbside pickup. So when that announcement came out that they were starting to make lunches for that population of kids again, we signal boosted that. And then, we really wanted to pivot to why. Like, why is a co-op so different from a regular store? And why is it so important when you have a co-op in your community? Why is that co-op so important? And so we've done a lot of sharing from open co-ops, and I'm really grateful to Bonnie Hudspeth from the Neighboring Food Co-op Association, because she put together an amazing document that referred back to all these programs that the open co-ops in the NFCA were implementing in their stores. And that was so helpful for us because we were just able to just scoop them right out. And we've started sharing posts from our NFCA co-ops that are open. And then this, so yeah.
So we're getting short of time, so I'm moving you into this.
Yeah, this was Lauren's idea, and I love it. So he's like, okay, everybody's home. What can we do? People want an action. People want something that they can do. Well, guess what? It's springtime. Let's plant victory gardens, right? So he organized a free online victory garden class with one of our local producers. Daisy Hill Farm is just right in the next town up from us. And she was glad to do it. Our hope was that some of our co-op owners would buy seedlings from her. I personally will be buying my tomatoes from her this year. I just haven't done that yet because it's not quite warm enough. So this obviously has gotten a lot of reach. You can see on the right, you can see the text of what Lauren posted. And then the only thing that this doesn't show, and it doesn't show the number of views. This video has been viewed 1.2 thousand times. It's had 1.2 thousand unique views. So people really liked this. People really liked this idea. There was a lot of chatter. It got shared a whole bunch of times. And this is all organic reach. I want to say that too. We didn't boost this. This is all organic. And again, a large part of that is those 19 shares, because it got shared to like the mom's page and the and then Maynard Business Alliance shared it, and then this other person shared it. So we had a 3,500 person organic reach with this.
Stop real quick on you and say, there were a couple term questions. When she says signal boosting, this is a common statement in social media. What we mean is take work that others are doing and promote it to your platform, give them a bigger reach. So there's Assabet signal boosting a lot of things that others in the community are doing that they know their owners want to know about, and signal boosting that. The other comment was organic reach. Organic reach means they didn't pay for it. They didn't advertise, they didn't pay for a boost on Facebook. It just happened because the content was so exciting, it went viral for them. So I'm gonna move to your next example because I don't want us to miss out on all these and we're getting short on time. Tell us about this one.
Yeah, so this is again, Lauren, like part of what he's been posting about is like, okay, how can you still get food? How can you, and so this is coffee delivery. So this also ended up being very popular with our owners. I can't imagine why, but being able to get delivery from these area coffee roasters, and it's great coffee. Muddy Waters Roasters, they actually come to our owners meeting every year, and they pour coffee for our members every year. And they're great. And so again, organic reach, 1,300 people. And Lauren has done this in addition, not just with coffee, he's done this with a lot of local farms, who's offering a CSA right now. And there are lots of farms in our area that are offering CSAs right now. And so he's been linking to places that offer meat shares, poultry shares. Milk has been a tough one. We haven't really found a place that's doing like local milk either for pickup or delivery. And then this is and then some of his posts are just inspirational. Like
our next one, I want to go real quick. This, by the way, is a signal boost. So they're taking other people's content and they're sending it out on their platform, but look how beautifully organized and accessible it is. So not only is it a signal boost for that other organization who's going to love you and remember that and be very supportive of the co-op, it's also an actual resource right there, clickable to your owners. So that's the type of, now we're going to inspiration, go for it.
So this was one of our early ones. Lauren posted this on March 10th. So this was kind of right at the beginning. And I know for some of you all across the country, it's, we locked down pretty early here in Massachusetts. For us, it started pretty early. So this is, this is Lauren being Lauren, and he's really good at his job, and he's got a picture of a person standing in a wheat field, and some infographic from NCG, Stronger Together. Like, I don't even know where these pictures come from. I don't even care. But they're great because, and again, that was an organic reach of 1,000 people. People just, really liked this one.
And when you're calling it inspirational post, I would say this is a values post. This is an opportunity to point out the values of your co-op that are really more valuable to everyone than ever right now. Why the co-op is really relevant to this moment. And he kind of captured that really, really well. And notice how many people he tags. I just want to point out all those things in blue at the bottom. He's tagged organizations in his community that should be paying attention to what the co-op are doing. He's being bold, and that really pays off.
He does that on most of his posts. He'll tag 1 or 10 different groups, depending on what kind of post it is. So he's really good at Facebook.
He is. I would say, please go follow Assabet Village Co-op Market social media. But I want to really say, too, what I want to bring it back to, and we're going to wrap this up now, is that the board took a moment, paused, and said, we need to communicate in these ways. We need to signal boost and get information out to people. We need to pivot our messaging. They communicated to Lauren what they wanted to do, got his ideas, and kind of gave him parameters, whether you have a committee, a staff person, a member of the board who does all your social media. The board had a conversation and decided what should we be messaging, what messaging should we pause, what kind of outreach should we be doing, and gave parameters. There is a board role in all of these areas for deciding how to proceed in a crisis. So I'm going to have to take this moment and just thank Siobain because we have a couple things. I want to make sure you know the next couple videos coming up. There are questions decided. Oh, there are tons of questions. If I get a chance, we'll just circle back. But first, let's take a moment. Thank Siobain for coming and doing this. I mean, she's like, I guess, like, isn't she awesome? I mean, people were just raving about your advice about the committees. So thank you so much to Siobain for coming and sharing this with us. Today's recording and slides and all those documents that were just provided to us by Siobain, as well as I'm going to put that Neighboring Food Co-op Association list of what established folks are doing. I'll put that in there for you guys as well. That's all going to be in a folder that'll be emailed out to you within the next 24 hours if you registered for this event. Upcoming later today, I don't want you to miss. We don't do this as a registered event, it's a Zoom event, so just go to Facebook and click the link in the event to get to Zoom. At 4:30 p.m. Central Time today, we have what we call the weekly download. This is actually your opportunity to just show up and chat with other startup food cooperators or established, you're welcome. And people just talk about what's working, what's not working, what's on their mind, what they're worried about. And we also at FCI get ideas from you about what you need videos on, and then you'll see those happen. So we got an idea last week, I think it was from Free Range, I believe it's Free Range, about having one that's just for board chairs to talk about how they're doing their work in the time of COVID-19, and that'll be coming up. So come join us, share your ideas. Monday, very excited to have another peer presentation. This is Smart Outreach with Prairie Food Co-op. Jerry Nash, their Prairie Food Co-op's outreach manager, will be sharing with you not just like, here's some good outreach ideas, but I love his lens, which is we need to be relevant and helpful to the community right now and show that the co-op already exists and is powerful, but it needs to be sustainable. I want to develop programs that are easy to run and that run themselves because we still have to develop a grocery store. So he's going to talk to you about that lens and a couple programs they've developed that meet both of those criteria that are working really well that you can copy. And then Wednesday, April 22nd, we were going to welcome back the always popular Katie Novak from Katie Novak Cooperative Coaching. She'll be here to talk about ownership growth in tough times. And the question, should we be trying to grow owners right now? And her answer is yes. And she's going to talk to you about how, when you can't get out of the house and you feel like it's a little touchy to message asking people to do things for the co-op. All right, so we have just a couple minutes, those who did stay. A couple questions came back around. And Grant, Tanya, there's lots of great comments just from your peers that you can learn from here. You got one?
In the chat.
I'm sorry?
Are there 69 comments in the chat?
Yes. So Kim asked, why did the board decide not to begin reaching out about the capital campaign, to do it a quiet right now, not launch as soon as you expected on a public level? Was it because of the economic sensitivity? Is it because where your project's at? Can you speak to that for just a moment?
Yeah, no, and I'm sorry, maybe I wasn't clear. We are going to be starting that silent phase, and we are going to be reaching out to people. What I wanted to do was just pause and just take a moment to think, should we be changing our tone? Should we be changing our message a little bit? How has COVID affected our community and our membership economically? But yes, no, so I'm sorry if I didn't make that clear. We are going to start that silent phase now. Yeah.
Excellent. The other quick one, since we have one more minute, I'm going to go back to it. I forgot who asked. I apologize. But that was a good one. What committees are active for you right now? We're having a hard time prioritizing. Not all the committees are going to run right now. How did you prioritize which committees, or which committees at least you have active right now, just to help our thought process?
Well, I mean, we're really trying really hard to keep business development going. And so that's where we've been focusing our energy. And so all the committees that we have right now, we've got the site selection committee, we've got grant writing, we've just spun up, we're spinning up capital campaign.
Lauren is very business development focused, because right now that's where you're at.
Right. Lauren is doing his thing with his volunteer. He has an outreach committee. He doesn't really run them like a committee with minutes and notes and everything, but he has people doing stuff for him still. So he's good for that. Would I love to have a nominating committee for the board? Yes. Am I going to get one this year? No.
Okay. Okay, well, I think that's the last of our questions, and we're exactly the top of the hour, but since we had time to wedge them in and you were still here, I thought we'd go for it. Okay, everyone, we're going to wrap it up. I hope to see a lot of you today at 4:30 Central on the Zoom call. Remember, that link is in the Facebook event for it. If you don't get Facebook, you don't do Facebook, just email me. I'll send you the link. And I hope to see you all in future calls. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Bye.